Hi, everyone. I want to introduce you to my dear friend, Dr. Thaeda Franz. She is a psychotherapist in private practice, an interfaith, interspiritual minister, and she works with clients with a variety of issues, including trauma, recovery, mood disorders, and relationship issues. Thank you so much for taking the time, Thaeda.
Oh, I'm so excited. I've been looking forward to this. Thanks, James.
So we were going to specifically talk about eating disorders, or in fact, again, I think right before we got on, I was kind of asking you about that, the labeling of things as disorders without addressing the roots of why we engage in ways that we engage based on my work in the ACE study. Instead of asking what's wrong with you and looking at somebody who's struggling with obesity and coming up with concepts like they have weak wills, etc., versus what happened to you,
Right.
right? And how we engage in different ways to not feel those things that have hurt us, right? We have these tools to avoid the pain, and that could be eating, that could be alcohol, that could be drugs. In my case, I started drinking when I was 13. So I'm going to stop talking, and I'm going to turn it over to you in terms of your thoughts around the issues of I'll stop. Go ahead.
Sure. Well, I think like a lot of things in our world, it's there are no easy answers. There's no way to just make it very simple. I can offer my views on some of the things that I see are wrong with how we look at people who are in a variety of body sizes, and some strategies or some different ways of looking at things to maybe be more helpful and be focused on what happened to you instead of what's wrong with you. Right?
That would be great. And,
yeah.
And I think like with our I think in terms of storytelling and changing the narrative, much of it our interest in this work has to do with the things that happen to us, right? So
Yes.
my focus working with domestic violence and individuals who engage in violence in relationship has to do with the fact that I grew up in that world, and it's my way of addressing that or dealing with that, or so that back into
I would be happy to include my personal story as a part of this, for sure.
And then the last thing is, we talked about a lot. These conversations are about what can each of us do in small ways or big ways to make this a better world.
Okay.
This is a fitting conversation in terms of the world we live in and the perceptions we have to live with that are not necessarily beneficial to our well-being.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. You might need to prompt me later to give some tips or some suggestions for how to make it a better world. The gray hair goes all the way through to the brain, and my memory isn't what it used to be. To start out, I'll just say my personal history with body and weight started when I was in first grade. I had a parent, my mother was very scared. She was very fat phobic. She was terrified myself and my twin sister would be fat. She was scared to death to be fat herself. She was always on a diet. And she put me on my first diet by the time I was 10. She sent me to Weight Watchers as a 10-year-old. She would drop me off and pick me up after the meeting was over. And before that, she used to make clothes for myself and my twin sister. My mom sewed. We were the last of 9 kids, and my mom didn't work, so my dad did. So she had to do what she could to save money. So she would make clothes, but every year she would have to measure us to know how to make our clothes. And I dreaded the measuring time, because invariably my body would have gotten bigger and she would roll her eyes and sigh and, oh, you just keep getting bigger, like really in a really shame inducing way. And I look back now and realize she was trying to be helpful. She was scared for me. She didn't want, and I wasn't a fat child. I was not in an exceedingly large body as a child. I wasn't skinny either. I wasn't thin. I wasn't in a small body. And I know she was trying to be helpful, and it was not helpful at all. It was actually traumatizing to have that experience. And being ashamed of being in a larger body was continually reinforced for me by our culture as I grew up. I mean, as a kid, the worst insult you can give somebody is you're fat. And actually, I even find that to be true with adults. When I worked in social services and a client would get upset with me, the first insult they would hurl at me is, "Oh, you're fat. You know, you're fat." And so that word is shame inducing, can be shame inducing in our culture. And we even have the word obesity, which is a made up term. It's not, and it was made, it's used to shame. The alleged obesity epidemic was created overnight by the medical establishment, who decided literally overnight they were going to change the BMI standards, and they were going to make a whole bunch of people now overweight or obese. And it's really, as a person who's in a large body, having that label, like you're obese, like what does that even mean? What does that say about my health? What does that say about my experiences? What does that say about anything? And I'm getting a little off track. Historically, I've been on and off diets my entire life. Like I said, starting at age 10, I would lose weight, go on a diet, lose weight, exercise, lose weight. And then invariably, I would not be able to sustain the activities that I had to do at the level they needed to be sustained at in order for me to keep the weight off. And I would gain the weight back, and I would feel all kinds of shame and guilt and upset. I also learned, because I restricted food, I learned when I allowed myself to eat whatever I wanted, it felt really good. It was soothing, it was comforting. So sometimes we see women in larger bodies and we automatically assume, oh, well, they must overeat, they must comfort eat. If I see a person in a large body, my first assumption is, boy, they've dieted a lot. Because the restriction of food is what causes more of the problem than the eating of too much. And I've experienced that personally. When I allow myself freedom to eat whatever it is I like, I eat in a very balanced way. When I'm dieting or coming off a diet, historically, oh my God, I couldn't keep donuts in the house or chips in the house. I would just eat my way through them, right? But that's only when I was concerned they would be restricted. When I allow everything, it's all good. And I was encouraged by the medical establishment to continue on this cycle. If I got too large, okay, it's time to, okay, Thaeda, you have to watch your calories, you have to cut out carbs, you have to exercise more, you have to be smaller. And so I continued in this gaining and losing and feeling ashamed and not liking my body and believing the body was the problem, and developing all kinds of disordered thoughts and behaviors around food and around my body. And about 5 years ago, I decided to have weight loss surgery at my doctor's encouragement. This would be good for you. I had a vertical sleeve gastrectomy, and I was a success because I lost all kinds of weight. And 2 years after the surgery, I started gaining the weight back slowly. And I was scared to death because here I had surgery and the weight was coming back on. And it was in part because I could not maintain the diet, which was a 1,000 calories a day. When you have stomach surgery, they expect you to live on 1,000 calories a day for the rest of your life. Anybody familiar with the Minnesota starvation experiment that was conducted in the 1940s is aware that they gave those people that were a part of the experiment 1,600 calories a day to live on, and that was considered starvation. And at 1,600 calories a day, those experiment participants developed some really outrageous behaviors around food and body. They were obsessed with food. They hoarded food. When they had the chance, they would gorge on food. Some of them changed their careers so they could be chefs, so they could be around food, even after the experiment was over, at 1,600 calories a day. So I was supposed to live on 1,000 calories a day, and I couldn't do it. And my body was fighting me, which is what your body does. Your body cannot tell the difference between a diet and famine. And it thinks you're dying, and it will do whatever it can to get you to start eating. Your sense of smell is enhanced. Food looks better. Food tastes better. Your metabolism changes. It slows way the heck down if you're not getting enough calories because your body thinks you're starving. And that happens whether you weigh 500 pounds or 150 pounds. So here I was 2 years out from surgery, gaining the weight back, terrified. I went to my doctor, and I said to him, I was starting to get concerned with some of the things I was doing to keep the weight off. Some of my behaviors, I'm not going to go into details, but some of my behaviors were getting pretty extreme. And I was scared. As a mental health professional, I was getting scared. I shared that information with my doctor, and his response was to put me on medication that would suppress my appetite. That was he's like, here's what I could do for you. I poured my heart out to him. I told him my whole history, and it was like, it just went right over his head. He's like, oh, well, the problem's still the weight. So let's get the weight off. Yeah. And that's when, for whatever reason, the gene that I have in my body that gets triggered if I go into energy deficit for too long. Energy deficit means you're not eating enough calories, right? I was in energy deficit too long, and I just got more obsessed and more extreme, and I was very, very ill about 2 years ago. So it took about 2 years of those kind of behaviors, and I was getting thinner and thinner and sicker and more obsessed, and it was terrible. And if you would have looked at me, people were looking at me and going, oh my gosh, Thaeda, you look great. You look amazing. You're doing so well. And I would get angry on the inside because I'm like, you have no idea what I'm doing to my body. Like, you think this looks healthy. The fact is, the body that I'm in now is a much healthier body than the one I was in.
So I'm just going to stop you there in terms of,
sure.
As I'm hearing all that, what you're sharing, and thank you so much, Thaeda, for opening your sharing your story with us. There's this convergence of all these. We're addressing a lot of different issues, like with the Black Lives Matter movement. We're addressing racism, right? We're addressing poverty. We're addressing the issues that our children are having in schools. We focus so much on their academics. We've dropped their social emotional development. We've actually become a really sick culture in many ways. And even just the response to your struggle is, here, just take a pill.
Right? Yeah. And just get a smaller body, no matter what it costs.
Right.
No matter how scared you are, just be smaller.
Yeah.
That's the message.
Become kind of, we've all become, we've been, what's the word when you collude, when you're not even conscious that you're part of the problem.
Brainwashed?
Yeah, like we're constantly shown these images of women with their perfect weight, and and the guy, and what the great, the perfect guy is, and the perfect children, right? So in this conversation of making this a better world, let's go there in terms of how should we begin to
Okay, so part of the problem is the $70 billion a year weight loss industry, diet culture.
Hmm.
And it's absolutely part of the capitalist culture. It is absolutely part of white supremacy. There is no doubt about it.
Hmm.
So what do we do about that? First of all, we eliminate to the best that we can fat phobia and the stigmatization of people in larger bodies, because weight stigma kills. People are dying because they don't want to go to the doctor because they're in a large body and they're afraid they're going to get the shaming lecture again. So we can stop judging people by the size of their bodies. We can stop even commenting on other people's bodies. Another person's body is none of your business. If you're happy to see someone, say it's so good to see you, not, oh my God, have you lost weight? Because even if they have, you don't know how they did it.
Hmm.
They could be throwing up every night. You don't know.
Hmm.
They could be exercising 4 hours a day. You don't know.
Hmm.
They could be taking medication that they really shouldn't be taking to suppress their appetite. You don't know what they're doing. And so not commenting on other people's weight is super helpful. Second of all, getting educated about what factors really impact health. And there are a couple books I would recommend. The first is called Body of Truth. That book goes through a whole bunch of research and what is true and what isn't true about body size and food consumption and health. The second is Body Respect. And that also includes the role of white supremacy and the weight loss industry together. So putting images in your social media feeds, like normalizing larger and diverse bodies, not just larger bodies, Black bodies, white bodies, people with varied level of abilities, larger bodies, smaller bodies, getting used to normalizing views of all different kinds of bodies, transgender bodies. That's really helpful. Calling out fat phobia when you see it. I have a dear friend who posted a meme that he thought was funny. And I mean, it wasn't cruel, but it was subtly fat phobic. And I sent him a message and just said, hey, you're a nice guy. You're a sensitive guy. I know you don't intend to harm. And here's what that meme says to me. And just lovingly and gently speaking up. There's another organization called benourished.org for people who are interested in body acceptance, size acceptance, and just human acceptance. Benourished.org is a great place to get a lot of free information about how to treat yourself well and treat other people well, regardless of body size.
And so you just shared a word that took me down this road: human acceptance, right? Accepting ourselves as human beings and loving ourselves for who we are and witnessing ourselves. And you've always seen me, Thaeda, and I love you for it. And in seeing me, I've been able to see myself. We met in seminary a number of years ago. And I want you to talk about that piece of it, the spiritual aspect of this. We're not just this body, right?
No.
So much more.
No, we're so much more. And for a very long time, I lived with shame and guilt and the belief that I was less than, even in the spiritual sense, because I was in the wrong sized body. And I am one of the things that happened to me is when I decided to get healthy, I had an encounter, a spiritual encounter. Again, I won't go into details, but I was made aware of the fact that because I am a healer in this world, there is a certain degree of energy that I am channeling when I am healing. And I need to be in a larger body to be able to sustain that kind of energy. Also, when I was restricting food, I was not able to be grounded at all. It was really hard for me to connect to spirit. Like I was just really struggling because I was so obsessed and the mind was always going. So nourishing the body well, taking care of my body well, helps me stay connected spiritually. And when I remember I call it the knowing with a capital K. When I'm in the knowing that I am an infinite creature of the divine, the size of my body is irrelevant. It's irrelevant. And the size of other people's bodies and the way they look and the way they move and the color of their skin, all of that is completely irrelevant when I am in the place of knowing. That's what's really important, is that inside essence and the awareness that the universe, God, spirit, whatever you call the God of your understanding, does not give two craps about what the number on the scale says for me today. Not at all. And so we value that as humans. That's an ego thing, right? And we don't, and that's, I can let that go. There's so much more space in my head and in my heart today because I am not consumed by this struggle, this fight, this whatever. I just let it go. And there's such freedom in that. And as I was able to let that struggle go, it just made so much space for spirit, for love, for growth, for change, in ways that just blew my mind.
You just brought up Father Richard, who I study with at the Living School, talks about these 4 splits from ourselves.
Yeah.
And one of the splits is the split from death, right? That we're all going to die, but we do everything in the world to avoid that inevitability, right? And all these things that we do to ourselves, it's just like, if somebody were to see, right, they would go, what is wrong with us, right? But dying before you die, right? Dying before you die so that you can actually, like you said, let go of that small self and actually be present with all your beauty and the beauty that's around you. Can you leave us with that, Thaeda, as we come to an end of our conversation? Is what, just share in terms of, so we talked about, we're in an inflection point. We're being forced to really confront ourselves. We're being forced to confront the failure of our institutions and our systems, and our own failure to come to this 4th split, which is that we're all interconnected.
Yeah.
Right? The 4th split is like, we've made it all about me, right?
Yep.
My separateness and I'm better than, so please share with us in terms of, what do you feel that you are doing to make this a better world? Obviously the work that you're doing, but what drives you? What compels you? What insights?
That's such a good question. You ask the best questions, James. What drives me is the deep desire, almost the obsession. I have a new obsession now. Instead of it being restriction and losing weight, it's for people to know, each person to know their belovedness, their wholeness, their completeness, their radiance, their beauty, for them to be able to come alive from the inside, and helping to dismantle whatever is in the way of that. And a big scale, it's white supremacy is in the way of that, or capitalist culture, diet culture is in the way of that. Anytime you have somebody telling you, you have to buy this, or you have to pay for this procedure so you can be an acceptable human, that's a problem for me. And I like to encourage folks to think about, who benefits? Who benefits from you starting that diet? Who benefits from you buying that pill? Who benefits by you buying those clothes, from you buying those clothes or having this procedure or whatever? Who benefits financially from you doing that? And the drive to see people free. I know what it's like to live in jail. I lived in jail since I was 10 years old. Could never get free until 2 years ago when I just let it all go. And I want that same freedom for any woman or man, anyone that I work with. I want them to know that freedom and that love.
Thank you, Reverend Thaeda Franz. Love you.
Oh, I love you, James. It was so good to be able to talk with you. Thank you.